After a lifetime of blindly following fundamentalist religion and toxic wellness culture, Lindsey Lockett was down at the bottom of her barrel as a young mother and tried to commit suicide. Luckily was saved by her husband. And the result of that was her choice, her first choice for herself to check herself in to a mental hospital and face herself and start making decisions. This episode is all about how you get out of binary thinking and how you start the path to becoming sovereign. Lindsey very graciously is sharing her story of how she overcame all that trauma to trust herself. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us, to the big mystery beyond the veil, to those little synchronistic breadcrumbs that lead you to a new realization, a new understanding of yourself beyond what you thought you were. And that only happens when you're willing to let go of all that you think you know and step into a whole new potential, a whole new possibility in your life. And I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird. I did that years ago. I stepped out of the conventional model that I was living in. I was living in a 20-year relationship. I thought I knew who I was, and I thought I was very convinced of my worldview based on my upbringing and my, my conventions and the world around me. And then it just wasn't getting better. Like just some sense of extreme sadness and dissatisfaction just kept growing and growing and growing within me, and it wouldn't stop. And at some point, it got to the place where I really literally wanted to die. I didn't want to be here anymore. And when it came to that place, I was a mother with two small children. So what am I going to do? Am I going to leave the planet, or am I going to actually open up to another possibility? And so my choice was, you know what, I got to be committed to my kids. So I've got to leave what's not working behind and find something new. And then I saw this vision, one of my first visions from the Great Spirit, of the end of the rope. I actually literally saw an end of the rope, and there it goes. Like, that's the end of the rope, Carrie. No more of this. You can't continue this way. You've got to follow me. That's the end of that chapter. I felt like this resonance through my whole body, and I was like, okay, that's that. I just knew it like I knew it like I knew it. I walked out, and within 6 months, I met a shamanic healer, and I began a journey of healing. And I healed at all levels. So I want to say to people who are like, well, you're just doing energy medicine, da 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 da. That's like not the solution for everything. That's not true. I actually work on the body. I work on my gut health, my microbiome. I eliminate diet, things like sugar from my diet, gluten, grains, other things. I take supplements to support my mitochondrial function in my body. I exercise, I drink water, I diet, and I also do energy medicine. And I also face my inner healing, and I listen to my emotions, and I do my inner navigation. And that's like a holistic. That's what holistic really means. Holistic doesn't necessarily mean that plus some pharmaceuticals. That's not exactly what that means. That means that you're going to find your total body solution, mind, body, spirit, emotion. That's what you're going to find. And today's guest is really an expert in this. That's why I'm really excited to have Lindsey Lockett on the show. Welcome, Lindsey.
Hi, thanks for having me, Carrie.
So glad you're here. So Lindsey Lockett is the host of the Holistic Trauma Healing Podcast. I'm also We're Trading Podcast, so you can find me over there. And I want to tell you a little bit about Lindsey. So after leaving behind the dogmas of fundamentalist religion and toxic wellness culture, Lindsey experienced her own dark night of the soul. During the healing journey that followed, she realized that trauma affects us as whole people, and therefore we need to heal as whole people. Although Lindsey has benefited tremendously from therapy and psychiatry, these modalities never totally resonated with her because she found that they forced her to fragment herself rather than heal holistically. And so that's why she set out to create an affordable and accessible approach that integrates the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and ancestral parts of our being. Because yeah, that ancestry part is real too. So really excited to share Lindsey's message with you today. We're gonna have a great conversation, a timely conversation, because out in the collective, there's a whole lot of people sort of at the precipice of that big decision that you and I each made in our life's journeys. We each got to that place where we had to step out of what everyone else was saying, and we had to tune in what was true for us and follow that, even if nobody else agreed with us. And so tell us about your journey to that sovereign decision.
That's such a really good opening question. I don't know how to answer it without sharing my whole life story. So I will try to keep it very brief and give you the Cliff's Notes. So as you read in my bio, I was raised in fundamentalist Christianity, beginning from a very young age. And Christianity taught me, brainwashed me to outsource my goodness, my worth, my beliefs. I also was raised in a very abusive household, and so I became a people pleaser. I developed a really hardcore fawn trauma response, which is the trauma response of changing and modifying yourself to fit in and avoid conflict. I was parenting my own parents, so a lot of codependency, a lot of ingrained trauma responses, an ego that became very fearful, very controlling. I'm actually still dealing with control issues to this day. Like that is still a big thing that I'm healing from, is my ego's need to hold on and control things. And for me, things kind of climaxed in late 2018. I'd had this lifetime of trauma, and I had been to therapy, and I had done EMDR and all of that, and I had had some really good results from that. But it just didn't get deep enough. It was more of a surface level kind of a healing, and I'm grateful for the relief that I experienced from EMDR, but it wasn't enough, and it wasn't something that I could sustain on my own. And so in late 2018, I began having some really mysterious pelvic issues. My issues were like chronic pelvic pain, bloating, the symptoms of a urinary tract infection, but my urine would never culture an infection, so I didn't actually have an infection. And my world just began to fall apart. I started losing sleep. I was having panic attacks all the time. There was so much adrenaline going through my body that I was losing weight faster than I could keep it on. And even though I never quit eating less, I actually started eating more. I started losing more and more weight. I lost about 25 pounds in like 8 weeks. It was really, I felt like I was shriveling up and dying, to be honest. And I began to have suicidal thoughts, not because I didn't love my children or my husband, not because I had a bad life. I don't. I actually have a really good life, but I couldn't see myself living a full and beautiful, rich life again. Like I really did feel like a victim to my circumstances and my physical body, and I just didn't see a way out. And so on March 7th, 2019, I actually did attempt suicide. By walking out into frigid temperatures wearing minimal clothing. My plan was to freeze to death, and my husband caught me, brought me back inside. 3 days later, I checked myself into inpatient mental health care. I stayed in the hospital for 5 days. And that choice, people ask me, sometimes people don't have like a moment. Sometimes it's a series of decisions. For me, it was a moment. The day I checked myself into the hospital was the first time I had ever taken responsibility for myself in my life. And my husband did not want me to go to the hospital. We did not have health insurance. I had no way to pay for it. It really was me just saying, look, if I'm going to heal, if you're going to make me live, if you're not going to let me go kill myself, then I have to do this thing for myself. I knew I was going in for pharmaceuticals. I knew I wasn't coming out without them. I was terrified to go in. The only thing I had in my head for what being in a mental hospital looked like is what Hollywood shows us. And so there was a lot of unknown. I was really terrified about that, especially as a control freak. I like to have a plan. I want to know what's going to happen, who's going to be there, how long is it going to last, what's it going to cost? And do I get to be gluten and dairy free while I'm here? Which of course in the hospital is a big no. So anyway, 5 days later, I checked myself out of the hospital, and I really just began the journey that I'm still on of putting myself back together, excavating trauma that was really deep. I knew that it wasn't just this physical illness that put me in this suicidal place. It was this physical illness on top of the shit I experienced in my childhood, the religious trauma, the getting married too young, having babies too young, living in a religion that was patriarchal and told me as a woman that I needed to submit and be quiet, believing that my body was bad, that my sexuality was wrong, just completely out of touch with my body, always living in my head. And I just began that very difficult but also necessary journey to free myself from this way that I was living. I couldn't go back. There was no choice. I didn't have a choice. I was either going to die or I had to figure out how to heal. And so as you read in my bio, like therapy was good. I appreciate therapy. I have a lot of respect for therapists. I'm so grateful for my psychiatrist and for the psychiatric medicines that I was taking. However, for me, it didn't address it holistically. And for me, psychiatric medications were really beneficial for helping to get my symptoms of anxiety and panic and insomnia under control. But it was like a false, it was like a faux regulated nervous system. It wasn't actually regulating my nervous system. It was giving me windows of time in which my nervous system was more regulated. However, by taking advantage of those windows, I was able to slowly but surely teach myself how to regulate my nervous system on my own. And I slowly weaned myself off of the medications. I'm now on no psychiatric medications whatsoever. And I have been holistically healing myself ever since, which means I'm addressing physical issues. I'm addressing my emotions instead of living in my head. I'm actually feeling my feelings now. I'm addressing my, the mental health aspect of it, because there's definitely limiting beliefs and mindset and all of that we have to address. I've had a spiritual awakening, or actually a few spiritual awakenings during this process. So I'm definitely addressing my spiritual health and then also my ancestral health, because those are the things that make us up as whole beings. I sort of get a little bit annoyed whenever people are like, yeah, it's mind, body, spirit. I'm like, no, actually it's mind, body, spirit, emotions, and ancestry. Like that's what we are as whole people. Let's address that, not just the mind, body, spirit, because there's some shit in my life that other members of my family have dealt with that's getting carried on. And I want it to stop with me, like I want to end those things with me. So that means I have to actually address some of the skeletons in the family closet, So, yeah. Did that answer your question?
That was like a nutshell of gorgeousness. I mean,
oh, great.
Yeah, I love it. Like everything you just said, because I can say that I have walked in my own journey very similar steps, without the actual like going into the checking myself in or anything like that. But yeah, it's a dark, I just find it's like almost like there is a gaping hole inside that can't be filled. And really for me, that decision was to come home to myself, to finally say, no more, I'm not living for other people. I'm going to live for me, and I'm going to find myself, and I'm going to find what's true for myself. And then I'm going to hold that truth. And then I'm going to speak that truth. And then I'm going to learn how to speak it better, because, there's a journey of speaking it, right? Because we're still, I was still in the matrix of like victim, rescuer, perpetrator. Like I wanted to blame everybody else for my stuff, right? So there's like this like process of walking towards like this clean, integrous space where I'm 100% responsible for me and my choices, and I allow other people to be 100% responsible for them and their choices. And it's kind of like if I'm driving on the freeway, I see you on your lane and I'm waving to you, but I'm not going to cross over into your lane and start telling you like how you're driving your car. I'm going to stay in my lane in my car and drive my car, and just like know that you're being held in your car just fine. I'm being held in my car just fine. And like my sense now, and I'm going to ask your intake on this, is that from a spiritual perspective or from like an embodied perspective, I just keep getting bigger and bigger hits that this earth plane doesn't work the same for everybody. Like not everybody has the same experience, and we all have extremely unique experiences. And so we can't start making assumptions that like just because we're having an experience that other people are also going to have it, or like the COVID, right? Like just because one person has a big challenge with it doesn't mean that everybody else is also going to be threatened in that way. And I think that's the biggest part about this 2020 that has been so frustrating for people, because they have this idea, and I used to have this idea too, that there's one reality shared by every single person. And what I think you're saying, and what I'm definitely saying, is that I haven't found that to be true in my journey.
No, I definitely have not found that to be true in my journey either. Everyone's experiences are different. And until I had a spiritual awakening, I very much lived in that sort of victim consciousness space of like, oh, bad things happen to me. Bad things are always happening to me. This is just the way my life is. Like, I drew the short straw, like that was sort of how I felt about my life. So bad things happened. And when bad things happened, I wasn't surprised because I expected bad things to happen. So moving out of that victim consciousness was really integral into reclaiming that power and that sovereignty and that responsibility that I have for myself. And so now, like, what I like to share with people, and some people this really resonates with them and some people it doesn't, is it was so freeing for me to actually learn about my soul and how my soul has lived many lifetimes before this one, and it will live many lifetimes after this life. But each lifetime, my soul chose to be in that lifetime. Like, it wasn't a mistake. My soul chose whatever physical body I had. It chose my parents, which means it chose my ancestry. It chose where it was going to incarnate on the physical plane, so geographically on the planet. And it chose the time period that it was going to incarnate in. And every single time there were people that I had soul contracts with that had to be fulfilled. There was karma that had to be worked out. There was all this stuff, right? That is everyone's soul's experience, but everyone's experience is still different. And so some of my lifetimes have been easier and some of my lifetimes have been harder, as I'm sure is the case for you and for everyone else. And it was actually really freeing for me to be like, oh, it's not that bad things always happen. I'm not actually a victim of my life. I'm not actually it doesn't serve a purpose for me to live expecting that bad things are always going to happen, because then that's the energy I'm putting out there. So of course that's what's coming to me. So as far as experiences, I completely agree with what you're saying. And I would even extend that into the healing modalities that we have. I was actually on a walk in the woods the other day, and I have a magical little wood space over here that I often receive downloads from spirit, source, universe, whatever you call it. And the universe was very clear, and it was like holistic trauma healing, which is the name of my podcast and the name of my work, is a frequency. It's a consciousness. And there are millions of people who have incarnated at this time on the planet, and they also have messages of healing. So it's not that holistic trauma healing is unique or special in any way. It's just its own frequency. It's its own consciousness, and it's going to draw people to it who resonate with that frequency. And then there are other people like you, Carrie, and other people like, famous authors that we know, little people on Instagram that we don't know. Like, we're everywhere because this awakening has to happen. And so the universe was like, I can't just send one or two people at this time in history. I got to send a lot. I got to send people in all walks of life. We've got to send people of different ages, of different backgrounds, different traumas, different families. Like, they've got to be on Instagram. They've got to be in leadership. They've got to be in government. They've got to be in healing spaces. Like, they've got to be everywhere, because this message of awakening and healing and not being victim to our lives or our circumstances, and up leveling and allowing consciousness and awareness to flow through us and manifest as pure love and pure compassion for other people. Like, that is what has to get out right now. And so whoever follows me, whoever signs up for my programs, whoever does that, that's because they resonate with my frequency. Whoever is following you, whoever's doing your stuff, that's who's resonating with your frequency. You and I are not in competition against each other. I'm not trying to get your clients. You're not trying to get mine. We're not trying to steal, clients from people who write New York Times bestselling books. There's so many people that are spreading this same message, and we are attracting people who resonate with us. So I think the experience of everyone is different. And I also think the healing that people are attracted to, or that's meant for them in this lifetime, is also different. And that's why there's so many different people doing this, because it has to get out there. We are literally on the tipping point of ourselves as a species, right? Like, we cannot continue to live and behave and think and act in the same ways that we have been, or we're literally going to kill each other and we're going to go extinct. And so there's millions of us, and you and I are just two of those millions of people who are on the planet, just trying to get people to come home to themselves, to take responsibility for themselves, to think for themselves, to heal themselves. And so everyone's experience is different. And also whatever resonates with you for healing is going to be different too. And that's okay.
Yeah, and that's okay. And it's interesting how challenging the dialogue, right? Like challenging the mainstream belief system
Yeah.
is the sort of like groupthink. It's
Mm-hmm.
groupthink. It's basically
Mm-hmm.
challenging groupthink. It's saying, you know what? There might be another perspective here to be heard. And we know there is because we all know each other. So we've all heard each other. We've been on each other's podcasts. We know there's millions of us, right? So
Yep.
we actually have a different perspective and it's not being reflected or listened to right now.
Yeah.
And all we're suggesting is, if you want to say, oh, I believe in science, then okay, let's talk about that actually, because there's like intention with any scientific experiment as well, right? Like I see so much bandied about on media. Well, I have this expert saying this. Well, my expert says this. Well, this scientific paper says this. Well, that scientific paper says that. Well, I can give you this proof. Well, I can give you that proof. And that actually is revealing something really, really important, which is what getting back to what you were talking about at the beginning. On your own life journey, you believed that you were shameful, bad, and broken because your Christian religion told you that if you were in a woman's body, your job was to shut up and be property of a man, right? And not to have any rights and not have your sexuality and not be embodied and not make choices for yourself, right? So you were taught that. So when you were living your life, you were living from that untrue for you space that almost killed you
Yep.
until you decided to wake up, challenge that fear that you had of going against the system, challenge that fear you had of going against your family, going against everything you ever learned up until then, to become the person that you actually are.
Yeah.
And we're at that collective moment now where people are being invited to step out of the group think and to actually, it's like learn about certain things like the reticular activating system. I'm sure you know a lot about
Mm-hmm.
that. Do you want to dive into that now?
The reticular activating system, that's where confirmation bias comes from.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like let's talk about that and cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. So it's so funny that you bring this up. So back in June of 2021, I actually released a course called Belief Beyond the Binary. And that was like my gift to the world, or my way of being like, hey, all of this binary, everything is right or wrong, black or white, good or bad, healthy or unhealthy, like all of this is not serving a purpose anymore. And actually, like the only thing that is binary is life and death. That's the only thing that's binary. You're either alive or you're not alive. Our nervous systems, their only job is to keep us alive, right? So our nervous systems are binary nervous systems. Now, that serves a purpose when you're like in the woods and there's a tiger sneaking up behind you and you're like, shit, I got to either figure out how to run away from this tiger or I got to stand up and fight this tiger. It serves a great purpose. But that binary doesn't really exist in very much more of our lives. And I don't know about you, Carrie, but I don't think that any of your listeners are actually literally being chased by tigers. So it's not serving a purpose anymore to behave in normal life situations as if you're being chased by a tiger. That very black and white, oh my God, this is life and death, right? Like your job probably is not life or death. Your friendships are not life and death. Like the content you're consuming on social media is not life and death. I would even go so far as to say that COVID is not life or death. There is a lot of nuance and a lot of complexity. Racism is not life and death. Not really. There's a lot of complexity and nuance with racism, with all social activism. So to get to the reticular activating system, it's actually more efficient for your brain because your brain wants to conserve energy, right? It takes a lot of energy for your brain to sit with multiple possibilities, multiple perspectives. Like that's a lot for your brain to sit with from an energetic perspective. And I'm not talking like spiritual energy. I'm talking like actual physical energy. Like it takes calories and fat and stuff like that for your brain to process information. So it's more efficient for your brain to just be able to be like, oh, this is easy. It's either right or it's wrong. Like these are the only two decisions that I have. This is the perspective. And it's the reticular activating system in the brain that sort of helps with that because not only are you saving energy by defaulting to, oh, it's just black or white. It's just right or wrong. It's good and bad. Like that's, it's easy, whatever, straightforward. So not only are you saving energy that way, but because anything that challenges your sense of certainty, which certainty isn't real anyway, like spoiler alert to anyone listening, certainty is actually a myth. It's not real. But the ego likes certainty. So it likes to pretend like it's certain about things. So in the reticular activating system, like you can't entertain, or you don't have the space for ideas and perspectives that don't already align with what you believe to be true. And we see this like playing out on our social media feeds all the time. So I think that social media algorithms have actually figured out how to tap into the reticular activating system, which is why most of the time our feeds are simply reflections or echo chambers of what we already believe. So then whenever the like one-off thing comes into our feeds that we completely disagree with, that we don't believe at all, our brains are already lazy. They're lazy because they're seeing everything in black and white. And when your social media feed confirms everything that you already believe, then when you have this like one-off thing that doesn't confirm what you believe anymore, all of a sudden it feels like a threat to your body. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Who does this person think they are? Where do they get off saying that? I want to see a source on this. Like, oh, I'm going to drop in and I'm going to leave them a really shaming comment, or I'm going to send them a DM and tell them what an asshole they are, or whatever. And really it's
Drive-by shaming.
Yeah, total drive-by shaming. And really it's all because it has nothing to do with them. It has nothing to do with your feed. It has everything to do with how your reticular activating system is simply looking to confirm what it already knows, because that's what makes you feel safe. That's what makes your nervous system feel safe, so that it doesn't feel like it has to run from the tiger or fight the tiger. It just likes to be safe in what it already believes. And so anything that challenges that literally feels like you're being chased or attacked by a tiger.
Yeah, and I was actually grappling with this exact point, because over the last week, I have been guided by Spirit to be posting some more provocative things that sort of challenge the energetics and get things loosened up, because I'm an expert at unstucking stuck energy. That's what I do. I unstuck it. And I do it with a lot of love and compassion. And sometimes it's a lot for me to hold, because the debate that comes into the feed that usually sparks debate on my feed is a lot to manage. It's like you got to like be present with that and really patient and loving and kind, while people are saying pretty, doing drive-by shaming and saying some really awful stuff. So, but the reason why, and I was also called to like put some tags that are the opposite perspective. So, like those hashtags. So I put the opposite perspective, like, and I was like, is it? And then I would put another opposite perspective and say, really? Are you sure? And, and so that's even provocative, because it's like, they're like using that hashtag, like, this is my hashtag. And I'm like, well, let's just like ask a question, like, is it really true? So I love that you're pointing this out, because you revealed in your own story share about how the religion that you were trained in doesn't allow questions. And you also revealed how the reticular activating system doesn't like questions or being provoked or having to think, because that actually causes stress to the body and makes the body think that an idea could kill it.
Yep.
It's an idea. So we've gotten to the place now in humanity where people think ideas can kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And because they think ideas can kill them, they can be manipulated left, right, and up and down by mass media all day long with fear, that actually causes a stress response in the body, right? And when people are stressed in their bodies, that produces unhealthy immunity, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the media, if you're watching the media or have been at all, I don't watch the media, so I don't know what's going on right now. But, for the last year and a half, for anyone who's been watching the mainstream media, like, they have just stress hormones coursing through their veins. And so, maybe they were even in a really good place before COVID started, like feeling stable, feeling healthy, like all of that. And now here we are a year and a half into this, and it looks like things are potentially more lockdowns and new mandates and all of that, like the vaccine, like you have all this stuff. And I think people are so tired. First of all, I think everyone is tired. I think that whole 2 weeks to flatten the curve that turned into a year and a half has really exhausted a lot of people. And so they're tired, which impairs your immune system.
And it also impairs your judgment, right? Because basically,
Right.
like I actually have a friend who's an RN, a lifetime RN, and she finally confessed in the conversation that the reason why she really just wants everyone to take the vaccine is because she just wants to get life back to normal, and she doesn't want to have to think anymore about all this stuff because it's causing too much stress.
I
And she
have heard
doesn't
that
watch the
so many
news, and
times.
she doesn't read any articles, and she doesn't educate herself because she doesn't want to know. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's really that's the problem. That
Yeah.
right there. And I
Yeah.
understand being tired with it because I got to say I provoke these discussions because I'm guided to, and it's a lot to hold. It's a lot to hold, and it is exhausting. It's
Yeah.
extremely exhausting.
And it's not easy because if we're talking about, let's talk about the vaccine for just a moment. And I'm not anti-vax. I'm also not pro-vax. So I want to be really clear so your listeners know that I'm not coming trying to promote any kind of an agenda either way. But if we just take the vaccine question, what I'm seeing is being used as the reason for getting a vaccine is because it's for the collective good. You need to do this. It's for the collective. We need to do this to protect the immunocompromised or the disabled or, old people or whatever. Like that's why you need to do it. Even if you're not in the risk group and even if you get COVID and you're not likely to die from it or experience complications, you should still get a vaccine because it's for the collective good. And I'm using air quotes there, for the collective good. And I think that is honestly a phrase that's used to manipulate people into doing something that may not align with who they are or with what their truth is or what their experience is or what's best for their body, because it's sort of because if you say no, then it's implied that you're against the collective good and that you're selfish and that you don't care about people who are immune compromised or the elderly or the disabled. So again, to me, that goes back to the black and white thinking, right? The pro-vax, the anti-vax, that's very black and white. That's why I'm neither. I'm in the gray area of informed consent. Like that's where I land on all of this. But it's for the collective good, all of that. It is very manipulative to me and is, like you were saying, your RN friend, she just wants things to go back to normal. And so, normal, when we want normal again, because we've been in this fight flight state for so long now and everybody's tired, we just want that normal again. And so we're willing to take whatever is given to us as the answer for here's how you get normal back. This is how you get normal back. And I don't know what I'm seeing. Like, I think the state of Minnesota, which is where I live, is at 70% vaccinated at this point, which a few months ago was their original goal, was 70% vaccinated, because that is supposedly what is herd immunity. And now we've reached that point, but people are still wearing masks everywhere. People are still asking you before you get invited somewhere, have you been vaccinated or not? People are like, have we really gone back to normal? No.
Yeah, no, and there
we
is no
haven't.
normal because that line of thinking, that group think demands 100% compliance with it. And
Mm-hmm.
that is exactly the problem here because it's not respectful of other perspectives that are going on in the collective. I've actually even seen people on my feed talk about a friend of mine actually who is allergic to the ingredients of vaccines. She actually will die if she has one. They've even said to her directly on the feed, well, that's just the cost we have to pay.
Wow.
You just have to take it. And if you die, well, that's just the cost we have to pay. Are we really those
Wow.
kind of people? Is that really where we've gotten to as humanity? See, I really think that's the bigger question. I think the bigger question that we're being asked by this planet is, well, I have a lot of questions I think the planet's asking us, but I think one of the questions the planet's asking us is, are we going to start loving and honoring each other even though we have opposite perspectives? Because just take
Yes.
a moment, like look in your own family line. Do you have the pattern where you believe something, but your mom believes the opposite, and then your kids believe the opposite of you? And so do you
Mm-hmm.
see how it leapfrogs? Like we
Mm-hmm.
always believe the opposite of each other. And I think there's actually a purpose to that. And I think the purpose to that is that we learn and grow from each other. We listen to each other. We watch each other. We learn from each other. And it creates a friction. It definitely creates a friction. But conflict and friction is the pathway to diplomacy if we can be with the uncomfortableness of the conflict and the dissonance it creates, we can get through that shadow of conflict and into diplomacy. Diplomacy leads to peace, and true peace, not like peace because you just like, did it because everybody guilted and shamed you into it, but because you actually are aligned with your choice. And maybe there's a solution that we all create together. Like, for example, like one solution is like, hey, people are worried about the hospital beds who have the COVID, vaccine. And they're like, well, you're just going to take up all of our hospital beds and all this. And it's like, well, maybe not, because there's another whole group of people who have researched preventative measures, right? That they've healed, like 98% of their people have healed through these preventative measures, and nobody's had to go to the hospital. I know that your uncle is one of those people, right? Like, where he's got preventative measures. People don't go in the hospital. They don't make stays in the hospital. They get this preventative measure. They heal and they're fine. And they don't take up hospital beds. So can't we support that as an initiative towards this, this concern that there is no hospital beds, or people are taking up too many hospital beds? Can we like then say, oh, well, great, here's a solution for that. Let's do that so that we don't impact ER nurses or hospitals, right? Mm-hmm. But instead, it's like, it's dogmatic. It's like, no, the only solution is this vaccine. And that's where I start to get like, this is like very, very stuck. It's very stuck and is entrenched. And anytime we're entrenched, we're in the shadows. So I just want to point that out. Like, the shadow of our human consciousness is that reptilian brain, right? It's that like that fear, that fight or flight you were talking about, that old ancient brain that knew that if you left the tribe, you were going to get dead in the woods by some tiger or something. That reptilian brain gets triggered and it goes into fear and it goes into fight or flight. And everybody right now, like you said, if they don't know how to regulate their nervous systems, they're all in permanent fight or flight right now. And so of course they're exhausted. They don't have any more capacity to have a logical conversation because they haven't made it through the reptilian brain, through the limbic brain and all the emotional processing to get to the frontal cortex where higher reasoning lives. I want to say that higher reasoning lives in a balanced neurological system in the frontal cortex. If you're not there, you're not having higher reasoning.
Yeah, I think people, if they don't understand the way that trauma works on the brain, anything that your nervous system perceives, and I love Resmaa Menakem's phrasing for this, anything that your nervous system perceives as too much, too fast, too soon has the potential to be traumatic. And so And trauma is not the event itself. So trauma was not the sexual abuse. It wasn't your parents' divorce. It wasn't the car accident. It wasn't the loss of your child. That was not the trauma. Trauma is the energy that is stored in the body that lingers because whatever it was you experienced was too much, too fast, too soon. So, COVID has been too much, too fast, too soon for a lot of people's nervous systems. And when the body is in that too much, too fast, too soon state, the brain, the frontal cortex, the logical analytical brain where we make sound decisions from, it goes completely offline. Like we do not have access to the logical analytical prefrontal cortex part of our brain. So in the moment when you're running when you're trying to figure out, am I going to run from this tiger? Am I going to fight from it? Like you need that part of your brain to be offline because you're not sitting there trying to write a dissertation about what you're going to do about this tiger. You have to be able to make a split-second decision, and that's made in the reptilian brain. That's the survival part of our brain. It only knows how to decide, okay, life or death. Like what do I got to do to keep my organism alive, right? But because that's the state we have to be in to figure out if we're going to fight or flee from these threats, the prefrontal cortex is totally offline. So in a moment, that's fine. That's totally fine because that's what your body had to do to keep you alive. But for a year and a half, everyone being in this fight or flight state, everyone's prefrontal cortex being offline, them not having access to it, that literally means every decision you're making is being made from a place of fear and survival. And I'm not saying that I'm not trying to get down on people. I'm not trying to condemn people and be like, oh, you're just living in fear or whatever. It's not that at all. Like my heart hurts for people who are living like that because I remember when I was living like that. For years, my prefrontal cortex was offline because I was in such a state of trauma energy, of that fight, flight, freeze, fawn state. And so I did make a lot of really bad decisions and irrational decisions and said irrational things because I wasn't actually in the brain space to be able to rationalize and weigh the pros and the cons and think for myself and ask questions and all of that. And so I really feel for people who have been in that state, but at the same time, I think it's important for people to acknowledge, oh, okay, I've been in this state. Like maybe this very rigid, constricted feeling that I have about masks or vaccines or whatever, maybe that's not actually coming from the rational, logical part of my brain. But again, it's so complex. There's so much nuance here because not only are we and I don't think that I have been living in a stress state for all of COVID. Like I feel pretty unaffected in a lot of ways by COVID. And I realize that's a privileged thing to say, but that's also my truth. So I feel pretty unaffected by COVID. I don't feel like I've been offline from my prefrontal cortex for the last year and a half. But I think because there are people like me and like you, Carrie, who we are still thinking, we are still able to rationalize and use our brains and think and ask questions. Then we have the media and the government and all of that who is further driving home the fear-based narrative. And it's because they know when we're living in fear, we're not making rational decisions and thinking for ourselves. They know that. And I mean, anyone who knows anything about basic biology should know that. I mean, this isn't a conspiracy theory. It just is. So, of course, if you're trying to push a narrative, if you're trying to get control of a people, if you can keep their rational brains offline and keep them out of their prefrontal cortex for long enough, not only are they exhausted and their immune systems aren't working the right way, but they're also willing to do whatever you tell them to do because they just want to be out of that state. Because that state is such a hard place to be in. It's a miserable place to be in. And people will I was willing to kill myself to get out of that state. So people are willing to do irrational things because they just want to be out of that fear state.
Yeah, and so there's other solutions for getting out of that fear state that you and I have both had to learn. Like, for
Absolutely.
example, hand over heart, hand over belly. 3
Mm.
deep breaths, into your
Mhm.
belly, like not chest breathing, because that's like anxiety breathing, but like
Yeah.
deep breaths in your belly, like 3
Yeah.
of them, like rebalancing your nervous system and realizing that the food you eat also is contributing to your body's sense of fear. Like if your body is being sieged by unhealthy food, it's going to go into a fear state. It's like I'm not getting nutrients.
Also, if your body is in a fear state, if it's in that fight flight state with that like energy, like caffeine is like the worst thing that you can do
I
for
know
that
people are
because
drinking so much coffee.
that's just going to make you feel worse. And on the flip side of that, alcohol is also a really bad thing to put in your body in that state. And oh my gosh, can we just like acknowledge that basically like mom culture for the first 6 months of COVID was basically about like how much wine can I get away with drinking while my children are home?
Yeah, I mean,
Like
let's
that
be
was
honest.
the culture.
That first thing that opened up in Texas was the alcohol stores, okay? Like literally almost like right alongside the groceries was and the line in the alcohol store was amazing. So like yeah, and hey, I'm not judging it cuz I also did that. I just know better now. I know how to bring myself into a healthy state, a balanced state, a loving state so I can be present and have capacity to deal with the stress that's clearly in the space. And also I want to say I really appreciated what you said about that you haven't had any kind of really significant bad thing happen during COVID. This whole last year I've had a lot of relaxation, I've had a lot of time at home, I've got a lot of done. I've spent time with my family. I went to Mexico twice and Peru twice. Okay, like so I traveled. I've actually had a great 2020 to 2021. And I also realized that's super privileged, right? Because I have a really healthy immune system. I was really lucky to be able to go to the Four Winds Life Body School, learn about energy medicine, learn about protocols to heal the mitochondria that make my cells happy and healthy, learn about my gut biome, learn about healthy diet, avoiding sugar, gluten, things like that, like I talked about at the beginning. I'm really fortunate I was able to have the money to invest in that training and to live that life.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I'm super grounded. Like I just don't have the same freakouts I used to have.
Mm-hmm.
Me going through this time right now, if I was the person I was 10 years ago, I would have already crashed my car into a pole or something like that. Like I just want to say, like, I understand. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And there are things you can do to take care of yourself. And Lindsey's got a whole lot of solutions like that. So I want to conclude this because this has been a great conversation. I also want to honor your time.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm good.
I mean, it's like this is really awesome. So
Oh,
what
good. I'm glad.
I mean, like, so for anybody, like if you've had this same pressure, like if you've experienced this same pressure with religion, for example, I do want to say one more thing about that because that thing really came up for me strong when you were talking about that. You know, if anybody's ever had the Jehovah's Witness come to your door and knock on the door to tell you like that you should be doing like because otherwise you're going to go straight to hell, the vaccine
Yeah.
conversation is the same. That's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's exactly
Yeah.
the same thing. There's no
Yeah.
difference between somebody telling you that you need to put that thing in your body, even if you disagree with it, and somebody saying you need to like believe in Jehovah Witness because you're obviously going to hell if you don't. Like that's
Yeah.
right. It's the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, this, as someone who grew up in this religion and also spent about 10 years of my life, like really hardcore pushing what I now call toxic wellness culture, both of which I see really huge indicators of ideologies that would be considered like cult-like. So there are 5 characteristics of cults or cult-like ideologies or dogmas. So maybe whenever you're thinking about COVID, the narrative, or the vaccine, or whatever it is, whatever ideology you're sort of sitting with, and like you're feeling out for yourself and feeling if it feels right for you, if it aligns with you, is the ideology trying to isolate you from other people in some way? So I would say with the vaccine thing, that's absolutely happening. Like, in New York City, if you don't have a vaccine, you can't go to restaurants or gyms or theaters, and it's going to spread to other places. So is it isolating you? Is it discouraging you from asking questions and thinking critically? I mean, I would say throughout all of COVID, like it's pretty much been discouraged to ask questions and think critically. And if you do, you're a conspiracy theorist. Is it trying to control what you do with your time or your money? So far, I think that has happened with COVID some. One thing that I will say about my perspective on the vaccine compared to places that have universal health care, like Canada, is that, the state of Minnesota wants to pay me $100 to go get a COVID vaccine. But what is the state of Minnesota going to pay if I have a reaction to that vaccine? Like what is the long-term financial support that I'm going to receive? So I do think that there is some weirdness about money going on there as well. So
Well, and the
what
truth
else?
is that there's actually the government has given all the vaccine companies zero liability
Yes.
for
And that
any
happened.
damages.
Yeah. And I want people to know, you can look for this for yourself if you don't believe me. It was actually February 4th, 2020, that the government granted legal indemnity to pharmaceutical companies for any measures that they developed to fight, treat, or cure COVID-19. And that includes vaccines. So before the pandemic was even declared, the pharmaceutical companies were granted complete immunity legally for any consequences that a vaccine might have. And that happened before the pandemic was declared.
And I want to add on to that that a lot of people are saying, well, there's no bad effects from the vaccine because they haven't known that there actually is. There's a database maintained by CDC called VAERS, VAERS. That website, VAERS website, has all the not even reported. There's actually 3 different scientific studies that have shown that they think it only is 1% of the actual damage.
Yeah.
That's being reported on that website. So you can look at that website and see that there's over 4,000 cases of death from the vaccine at this point. And that is commensurate with all the deaths from all vaccines ever created up until now. So I would say that again. All the vaccines that have ever been created up until now since vaccines started being used is about 4,000 something. And now we are now at that number and surpassing that number in the deaths in 4 months for this vaccine, for this series of vaccines. That's significant.
That's really significant. Yeah. So, so cults try to isolate people. They discourage you from thinking critically and asking questions. They try to have control over your time and money. They also try to control behavior. So I think that that one's pretty self-explanatory. And they seek to control our thoughts. And so that I think that that also is very self-explanatory. Like you're not even allowed to have a thought about like, well, maybe COVID isn't as bad as I think it is, or maybe I don't want this vaccine. Like you're not even allowed to have that thought, because if you were to vocalize it in any way, you're going to be slammed. So those are the 5 like characteristics of cult-like ideologies, and that's really what I'm teaching in my course, Belief Beyond the Binary. But it's less about how to identify cults or binary belief systems, is what I call them now, because I think when we say the word cult, people tend to associate that with religion. And I want to separate the association of cult from it being only religion, and just acknowledge that like any ideology has the potential to be a binary belief system. So, I mean, it can be religion, healthcare, politics, activism, like, homeschooling, like literally any ideology has the potential to be a binary belief system. And so like what I teach in my course is not just how to identify them, which is what these 5 characteristics are, but also like, what is being stored in your body as a result of that? Like, how is that informing the decisions and the patterns that are playing out in your life right now? And we go all into like setting boundaries with people who are still in binary belief systems, who aren't ready to come out themselves. And the whole goal of my course is bringing people back to a place of self-trust, self-guidance, trusting themselves to think critically and ask questions, and then ultimately like trusting themselves to take radical responsibility for themselves, even if that means that the responsibility they're taking for themselves is really frowned upon or discouraged. That ultimately it is made from a place of groundedness in their integrity and their authenticity. And that's what self-responsibility is. And self-responsibility is the gateway to healing anything. If you're not willing to take that responsibility for yourself, if you're still living in victim consciousness, if you're still waiting for an apology from your parents or your ex-spouse or whoever you're waiting for an apology from, like you're going to be waiting a really long time, and you're still outsourcing your healing and your power to those people because it's contingent on what they're doing, when really self-responsibility means my healing isn't contingent on anything or anyone but myself.
I really love that you said that. My healing isn't contingent on anyone or anything but myself. And you're right. Until you're ready to really take personal responsibility for your life, I proved you can go to psychotherapy for 20 years and think you're helping yourself. And
Right.
you're really just not taking responsibility for your life.
Yep.
And you have to actually choose that. You have to
Yeah.
deeply choose that you're really ready. Like, my choice was like, well, if I'm ready to leave the planet by killing myself, then I guess I could actually just change. That would be like the next solution. I could actually just work on myself and
Yeah, but wasn't
transform.
it a harder thing to do? It would have been
It
easier to
was
kill
hard.
yourself.
I know, because you get out of it, right? Like, oh, well, I'm
Yeah,
out of here. But see, it's not actually, because I've had another lifetime where I did that, and it comes back to haunt you.
it
Like,
does.
you actually don't get away with anything. You have
Yeah.
to face it. That's the only way. And I know that that's the precious moment that everybody's in right now. And so as healers, as people like in my audience, a lot of people in my audience are, really consider themselves to be on this journey somewhere along the path of this, starting to wake up to this, or very woke, somewhere along that spectrum. And they feel like they want to help other people, right? And I really feel like the best way we can help other people is by seeing them capable of making their self-responsibility choices rather than enabling them by agreeing with them, especially if it's not true for us. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, it's, you know, I mentioned earlier that I have had some control issues, and the root of my control issues are that I was raised in this very chaotic environment growing up. And so my ego, my pain body thinks that it has to maintain control over my environment and the people in it in order to feel safe, which, that's not serving me. It's actually damaging. It's not good for my relationships. It's not good for me personally. And it's just not working. But that requires me being able to take responsibility for my actions, for my belief, the limiting belief that I need to have control over things, and then go through the uncomfortable process of letting myself be in situations where I don't have control and learning how to be okay in that situation. And when you think you have to control everything and everybody, you're basically saying, I don't believe that you can take care of yourself, so I have to take care of you for you. I don't believe that you can make the right decision. So I have to influence that decision for you somehow. So really, like, at the root of control is fear. And I mean, everything leads back to fear, like, spoiler alert, right? So the root of control is fear, and there's so much freedom when you can release that control and be like, you know what? I only have control over myself. I can only make decisions for myself. And I have to trust that they are doing what they think is best for them too. I may not understand it. I may not agree with it, but it doesn't matter because it's not me. I am only just taking care of myself, and I'm trusting them to take care of themselves. And I'm still working on that. Like, I'm very much still working on that. And to be honest, it's easier for me to let go of control with people who I don't have that close relationship with, So it's like kind of like when you first start setting boundaries, sometimes it's easier to set boundaries with people you don't know very well or people that are acquaintances. And then you kind of work your way into setting boundaries with people you're closer to, like your parents and your spouse and your grown children or whatever. So I see it the same way with like releasing control. Sometimes it's easier to release control over what people in the collective are doing and just be like, well, okay, I mean, that's their thing, whatever. And then you kind of work your way in. So I released control of what the collective is doing a long time ago. Right now, I've worked my way into my inner circle, and I'm like trying to release control over, my husband and my kids. So, and it was the same way with boundaries. It was way easier for me to set boundaries in the beginning with people who were just acquaintances or casual friends, or I just knew them professionally or whatever, than it was to set boundaries with my best friend and my children, So I think we can work our way in, but let's not stop working our way in. Like, continually releasing, continually letting go, like surrendering always. That really is an act of radical self-responsibility as well, because that is saying, like, I am free and so are you. And what my freedom, what my choice looks like might be different from yours, but I still trust that you're able to do this. I trust that you're able to make your own decisions. I trust that you're able to think critically. And even if you're not, it's not actually my problem because I only have responsibility over myself.
There you go. That's exactly right. And that's why I think, many people like me are advocating to just, let everybody make their own choice.
Yeah, live and let live, right?
I mean, that's what this nation's all about, and we're all about letting people make their own choices and have
Yeah.
their free will. And if we take that away, we're the last place where that lives on this planet. That would be a
Yep.
sad day to me. So
Yep.
that's why I have
Yeah.
these conversations. That's why I dig in, and that's why I bring experts like Lindsey on who've walked the walk. Girl, you walk the walk. I so resonate with many of the things you said, like
Thanks.
same messages I've gotten for myself. And it's not easy. Okay, this work is hard. It's hard to face the fear. I'm sure. I didn't have to break out of dogma. My mom did. I didn't have to break out of that, but I'm sure it's hard to break out of it. I am quite certain that that's difficult to break free of that programming and the fear of going to hell and all of that it generates. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it
Just
is.
like I'm sure it's terrifying to break free of, this idea that your doctor doesn't necessarily know the right answer. Like, that's terrifying. What?
I mean, but what I will say about that is let's take the vaccine conversation off the table for a minute. Let's just talk about like informed consent in general, right? So when I was pregnant with my son, I started having contractions at 33 weeks. We went to the hospital. They checked me. I wasn't dilating at all, but I was hooked up to the contraction monitor and the baby heart rate monitor. And I mean, I was having regular contractions every 5 minutes. They weren't painful. I mean, maybe they were Braxton Hicks. I don't know. But they gave me a couple of medications to try to get the contractions to stop, and the contractions weren't stopping. So they decided to admit me to the hospital. They injected me with a steroid so that his lungs would develop faster. They did a sonogram where they measured him, and they took all these different measurements of him so that they could try to guess his weight. They determined that he was probably over 5 pounds, which is the weight that a preemie has to be before it's allowed to leave the hospital. So my son was already there, and he was at 33 weeks instead of 40. And I was still having contractions. And so they decided to put me on a magnesium sulfate drip, so IV. And so I was confined to bed rest. I was not allowed to get up except to go to the bathroom. I wasn't allowed to take a shower. I wasn't allowed to leave my room. I wasn't allowed to walk around, like very, very restricted. And so I started this magnesium drip. It was never explained to me beforehand, like, here's what some symptom or some side effects of this might be. Here are the potential long-term complications that having you on this might cause. Do you consent? Do you still want it? That was never explained to me. It was just like, we have to do whatever it takes to keep this baby inside of you. Here is this thing that we're going to do. And they didn't even really give me time to ask questions or object. They made it seem very urgent. And I've since talked to a lot of people, some of whom have actually left the medical industry because of this, whereas there is this false sense of urgency put on people to try to make a decision in the moment. So again, you're putting people in that reptilian brain state and expecting them to make a logical, analytical decision. But anyway, that aside, so I ended up being on this magnesium sulfate drip for 2 weeks. I was in the hospital on bed rest 2 weeks. Every day at like 6, 7 in the evening, I would get really sick, nauseous, throwing up. My heart would do weird things, and they would send a lab tech in to take my blood. After like 4 days of this, my husband and I were like, why is it that every day I get sick, you send a lab tech in to take my blood? And finally, my doctor is like, oh, because magnesium sulfate has the potential to cause long-term cardiovascular and pulmonary problems. And so we have to monitor your blood levels of magnesium very closely so that we can take you off of it before you start having these cardiovascular and pulmonary problems. Was that explained to me before I was put on this drip? No. So I was not given the ability to make an informed choice. Still, I was only 20 years old. I was still very deeply religious at this point, which meant I was also like very submitted to authority. And so I perceived doctors and nurses with stethoscopes and white coats as authority figures. They know more than me. You don't question it. So I continued to stay on the magnesium. It was very uncomfortable. After 2 weeks, my doctor came in and said, okay, we have to take you off the magnesium sulfate drip now. Your levels are coming back. You're becoming toxic with magnesium. At this point, it's better for you to deliver your baby early than it is for you to continue staying on this drip. So now the narrative had changed. At first, it was like, we got to do whatever it takes to keep this baby in you. And now after 2 weeks, it's like, oh, wait a second. It's actually better for the baby to come than it is for you to stay on this drip and keep the baby inside of you. Anyway, I got off the magnesium drip. The whole time I had contractions the entire 2.5 weeks. I was in the hospital for 17 days total. I had contractions every 5 minutes, every day that I was there. They never stopped, but I wasn't ever in true labor because my cervix didn't dilate even a centimeter, like not at all. So it wasn't actually as emergent of a situation as they made it out to be. Like my water wasn't breaking, my cervix wasn't dilating. You're not in true active labor unless your cervix is dilating, spoiler alert. So, anyway, that's one example of how it's explained to people in a way that makes it feel more urgent than it is. You're not given the ability to ask questions because now, because of this urgency, they've put you into your reptile brain and they've activated your nervous system. So you're not in your logical, analytical prefrontal cortex anymore, but you're still expected to be able to make a decision. You're discouraged from asking questions. And the way that it's sold to you is it's for the good of your baby. Right? You got to do whatever it takes to keep your baby alive. And of course, I was 20 years old. I'd never been pregnant before in my life. So yeah, I was going to do whatever they told me because I perceive them as authority figures. And I listened to authority, right? Because I was raised to listen to authority and do what I was told because that's what good girls do. So, but now with this whole COVID thing happening and the vaccine thing happening, I see the same thing. People are it's being presented like it's an emergency. And then we're expecting people to be able to make rational, logical decisions, even though they have purposefully been put in this like fight or flight state in their reptilian brain. We're not explaining to people the full risks, side effects, complications. Like we're not explaining that to people.
And actually by contract, Pfizer doesn't have to release any of the data of the side effects until after the drug is approved.
Yeah. Isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah, that's kind of scary to me.
And we're manipulating people by being like, it's for the collective good. It's for the good of your baby. It's for the collective good. So if as a mother, because we could do a whole podcast episode, Carrie, on shame, for mothers, like mother
shaming mothers. Yeah,
but
exactly.
you're not in the hospital like in preterm labor and they give you this option to quote unquote save your baby. You don't say no. Why don't you say no? Even if it didn't sit right with me, you can't say no. Why? Because you're going to be shamed. Well,
Yeah, and because
why
we
aren't
don't
you willing to do whatever it takes?
be,
Like
because we're not encouraged. I know it's definitely it's very activating
it is.
because we have been encouraged to be quiet and compliant up until now. And that has
Yes.
been okay, so folks, that's the definition of patriarchy. That's what that
Mm.
means.
Mhm.
That's what that means. Patriarchy. We are
Mhm.
switching now into sovereignty. Okay, so that's the age of Aquarius I keep talking to you guys about. Sovereignty. Sovereignty requires you to make your personal choice no matter what anyone else thinks or does. And even when making your choice, you have to know that there's a unique thumbprint journey. Every person, that's why that's in the book, unique thumbprint journey. Every person has to follow their own inner guidance. That
Mhm.
is that's the truth for you. It's not the truth for me. It's not the truth for Lindsay. It's your truth. Whatever your truth is your truth. And maybe we align in some places, and that's awesome. And it's nice, when we align, but we can't be looking for the alignment with others. We have to find it within. And that's
Right.
what sovereignty means.
Right.
And sovereignty doesn't mean you're selfish and you're turning your back on people. That's
No.
not what that means. It actually means something far significant. To me, it means that you're aware that you actually are not in control
Mhm.
of the grand design. It
Yeah.
actually means that you know that you actually can't stop people's consequences for them, that
Right.
actually you don't have that power. You
No.
only have power over your own journey. That's truly what sovereignty means. And it means having compassion that I can't help you. I
Right.
want to help you,
Yeah.
but I
And,
can't.
and for me, sovereignty means like I'm grounded enough in myself to make my own choices. And if there are consequences for my choices, I'm going to be the one responsible for my consequences, right?
Exactly.
Like, so it works both ways. It's not just, oh, I'm sovereign and like I'm, not going to vaccinate and I'm not going to wear a mask and all of this. And like, I don't care what happens to anybody else. That's not what sovereignty is at all. Not
No.
at all. It means like, okay, I have all the information that I need. I'm making a decision. I'm
And I'm
trusting that
owning my
decision is,
choices.
I'm trusting that it's right for me. And if something happens, I'm the one who has to take responsibility for that. And yes, the collective is, that's I don't have the answer for what do we value more, individual freedom or collective good. Like I don't have the answer for that, to be honest. My work focuses on healing the individual in order to heal the collective. So when I'm doing my work and you're doing your work and everyone listening is doing their work, the only work we can do is individual. There
Exactly.
is no collective work. Like there's not.
And I
It's
can't make somebody eat healthy either. Like
no.
I can't make people pay attention to their microbiome or realize that Roundup is in their food. Like
Right.
I
No.
actually I can't do any of that. I can only know
Nope.
that for myself and do my own inner healing and
Yep.
focus on me. That's all I can do. I can be an example. And if somebody like gets curious, like, hey, how'd you lose 20 pounds in a month? Well,
Yeah.
I could probably answer that question by explaining about what keto it means.
Yeah.
But until somebody asks me, it's not really my business to tell them.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Do you know your human design type,
I'm a
Carrie?
manifester. I make
Okay.
invitations. I invite people all day long to come have conversations.
Okay, so I'm a projector. so
We're a
so
good
my
team.
strategy is you can invite me because I'm waiting for an invitation, right? I'm like, somebody please ask me for my expertise because I have a lot of it, but I can't just start giving it out because you're not going to receive it.
And see, I
So
see how I invited everybody to come
yeah,
listen, and then I invited you to come talk, and now we had this great conversation.
I know.
I really
And
hope it's been
I'm
helpful.
totally in my element here. Like I could talk about this all day because I've been invited to talk about it. So it's like, ooh, it just gets me really excited. Yeah, I mentioned earlier in the episode, I am not pro-vax. I am not anti-vax. People hear you say that you question the safety of something or the efficacy of something, and they automatically try again to go to that binary. Oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. You're one of those crazy QAnon.
Oh yeah, I've been accused of being a
conspiracy.
cultist now at this point. Like I've had people on my feed like saying I'm a cult. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm only telling you do what's right for you, but okay, because
Yeah.
that's not in the definition of cult.
Yeah,
I'm actually telling
yeah.
you follow your own guidance.
No, no. A binary
Not rational.
belief system will never tell you to follow your own inner compass.
No.
The binary belief system will always tell you do, what to believe, how to act, how to think, and who to be around, and how to spend your money and how to spend your time. Like, that's what a binary belief system will do. We're over here like, look, I don't care what you do.
I
I
really
really
don't.
don't. I want you to make the best decision for you. And if you are given all of the information and the pros and the cons, and you weigh all of that within yourself and you sit with it, you're not being forced to make a decision right now, but like, hey, let me go home and think about it. Let me go home and sleep on it. Let me talk to some people that I trust in my life and like weigh this decision, because it's a big fucking decision. It's a big fucking decision.
It is a big decision.
To put something in your body
That's experimental.
It's still in clinical trials. Like,
You're the guinea pigs, babes.
Yes,
yeah.
You are the guinea pigs. It's a big freaking decision. Don't take it lightly, and don't let people twist your arm by using that manipulative language of, oh, it's for the collective good. Like, maybe it is. Maybe it is for the collective good. Is the collective going to pay my medical bills if something goes wrong? At this point in the United States of America, that's a big fat no. Maybe if I'm in Canada, my decision might be completely different, because I wouldn't have to think about that. Like, if I had a complication from the vaccine, I could receive free healthcare. I'd be taken care of for the rest of my life. But that's not how it is in the United States. And that has to be part of our decision-making process. But nobody's allowing it to be part of the decision-making process. You're either a pro-vaxxer, or you're either doing what's your duty for the collective good.
Yeah, you're doing your duty and being a good citizen.
Or
you're being a rebel and you're lying and you're lying to us.
Right.
You're causing us fear.
Yep. You're in the like freaking anti-vaxxer QAnon or whatever it is.
Lindsey, like all these conversations, I know that I am a doorway, that as you walk up to this doorway, there's a lot of fear. That's true. Because I know myself. I'm a doorway to a divine reality. That's who I am. That's who you are. That's who anybody who's crossed over. Anybody who's actually taken that journey and found their inner truth and live by your inner compass and are aligned in that way, you become a doorway for other people. And that's why sometimes people start to react in fear around you, because it's scary to take that leap. It's scary to like make your own decisions. It's scary to like know that you don't have an easy button to push, and make a decision. And it's really scary to know that you actually have to educate yourself. Like, you have to read all those scientific papers. You have to watch all those like hours and hours and hours of testimony. You have to like read the book or listen to the audio. You have to do all that if you want to be educated. And yeah, like there's no like little like meme that's going to solve that for you. Like, you actually have to use your brain.
Yeah.
And like you said, it takes energy. So you got to feed your body some good food and some good water and some good rest and some good meditation so you can handle it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have no capacity to handle this conversation.
Right. And in my work, like, coming back to the self, coming back to the body, coming back to the breath, like learning to regulate your nervous system, that will serve you in more than just living a life free from anxiety or depression or whatever it is that you're struggling with. Like, yes, those things will serve you in helping you to overcome that, but it serves you in every way possible. Like,
yes,
in every way possible,
including your relationships, especially.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Your nervous system is a resource in your relationships. Like, it takes nervous system energy to be in a relationship. And you don't even realize how much until you realize how much. And then you're like, shit, it takes a lot of nervous system energy.
Wow, I was really out of whack before. No wonder my relationships are struggling.
I mean, honestly, that is how it is. And
that's why I've been asking people about their relationships. Like, what happens in your relationships? This is what you do in your relationships. And that's not, and I do provoke situations because I want people to see, like, my whole goal is people to wake up, because it's actually better on the other side. Like, it's so much better when you're regulated.
It really is. I tell you what, like, I thought I had everything figured out whenever I was a certified health coach, telling people to restrict all their diet. And I was very much into like toxic wellness culture. I was also very religious. And so I had it all figured out that way. Like, I knew the Bible backwards and forwards. I knew how to evangelize to people. Like, I gave my money to the church. I was a pastor's wife. Like, I was homeschooling my children to keep them out of the, sacrilegious public schools. Like, and I really thought I had it all figured out. And what I know now on the other side of that, like having taken responsibility for myself and deconstructed from religion and unpacked my trauma and excavated and learning how to regulate my nervous system, I was so enslaved then. But I had this like egoic belief that I had it all figured out and I was doing the right thing, air quotes. And now that I'm on the outside of that, I'm like, Whoa. Wow. It's amazing what my ego was able to convince me of. It's amazing that it
Exactly.
was able to convince me that I had it all figured out. Like
And
I
that's why
knew.
you got to take the journey to the frontal cortex. It's the only way, people. Like, if you really want to know the truth, you got to make it to the frontal cortex.
And also the journey to the heart.
Then the heart.
Like
Yeah.
there's a connection between, it's the longest 12 inches there is from the brain to the heart. Right? Like,
Yeah.
because any of the decisions that we're making, if they're not coming from a place of heart activation, of like pure love, pure compassion, pure consciousness, I don't know. I don't know if it really is the right decision.
Exactly. You got to make the decision from love, no matter what it is. And I honor your decision. I honor everybody here in this conversation. I'm really glad for everybody who stayed with us this whole time. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
being willing to get through the cognitive dissonance and to be
Ooh.
provoked and to listen and to open up and to hear another perspective, because that's the only way we're going to come to diplomacy is when we can listen to each other. And so I really value your time and your consideration, your willingness to be here. And I welcome you to check out Lindsey Lockett and her podcast, and also her Trauma Healers Circle. She has an online community of empowered women that cheer each other on as they become the heroes of their own stories. And I so resonate with that. Yes, yes, and yes. I just welcome you guys to check out also the Holistic Trauma Healing Podcast. I'll put a link in the show notes. And I think my episode is out or is coming anyway. So we'll put a link if we can to that. And I just welcome you all to like and share and be brave. Share this out. Be brave. Why not? Stir the pot.
Yeah.
Send it out there. We'll take all the heat. We can handle it.
Yeah.
Send
And
it out.
I have some posts on my Instagram feed about personal sovereignty, authenticity, integrity, and also medical freedom. So if anyone wants to check out my Instagram, it's at I am Lindsey Lockett. And I have some posts in my feed about that if you're interested, if you want to share those or whatever. And also my podcast too. Like I haven't talked specifically about medical freedom, but I do have an episode. It's episode 51 where I share my core values, and one of them is medical freedom, and I explain why in that post or in that episode. That episode is called "No One Is Disposable." So.
No one is disposable. I love that. Listen to that. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Lindsey, for sharing your wisdom. I appreciate your projector self. I love projectors. And yeah, and we'll see you guys next week on Soul Nectar Show. Here's a kiss. Let's give kisses. We're going to give a kiss on the way out.
Okay. Mwah.
Love you all. We'll
Love
see you
it.
next time on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now.
Bye.
If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now. To dive in deeper to nourishing conversation, visit soulnectar.show.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken away to show. Take a sip from the drip of nectar, from the source of who you are. Soul Nectar Show. Yeah, yeah.